On today's Soundiron session, we're going to be breaking down a composition inspired by the music of Chernobyl, so stick around. Hello again and welcome back to another episode of Soundiron Sessions. My name is Craig Peters and today we're going to be breaking down a track that I wrote that was heavily inspired by the score for Chernobyl. The music for Chernobyl was scored by Hildur Guðnadóttir and she did a really good job of channeling that dark and ominous sound, so I really wanted to go for that and really lean heavily into that really dark and ominous sound. And I'm using a few Soundiron libraries in this track. I really wanted to keep it minimal, but I'm using our Rust Prime, which we recently just came out with. It is a compendium of all of our Rust volumes, so I really wanted to use as much of that as possible. And then I also have our Radiant Decay, which is an awesome sound design library, as well as artillery Shell Cello and our Hyperion Octobass. So I'm gonna hit play, we'll listen to the track, and then I'll start breaking down how I used these different libraries together to achieve the final piece. All right, so that's the track, so let's go ahead and start breaking it down a little bit. So I initially started this demo using instances of Rust Prime. I wanted to mainly use as much of Rust Prime as I could along with these other virtual instruments. So with this, I started it off with this Rust 1 ambience, and I just thought it had a really cool tone. It's a little bit higher, but it has this really like kind of ominous, airy quality to it. So let's have a listen to just this ambience by itself. This almost sounds like this howling whisper or something. So after that ambience plays for a little bit, I wanted to start bringing in some other sounds, so I'm using this Rust 2 ensemble, so let's have a listen to both of these together. Also kind of reminds me a little bit of the Silent Hill soundtrack. And then around the time that this Rust 2 ensemble comes in, I'm also using some of these windmill creaks from Rust 4. So let's check that out together. I'll move up a little bit. And then after that, I'm starting to use some of these sounds from Radiant Decay. This library honestly has a really cool tone and it's very suited for soundtracks like Chernobyl where you really want to have that dark, ominous, kind of brooding sound. So let's play a little bit. So I have my MIDI keyboard here and you can see with the XY, it's moving around between these different layers. So you're kind of getting these blendings of different ambiences, which is really cool. Adds a lot of movement to the track. And this is just the initial patch when you load up Radiant Decay. And it's funny, when I was working on this track and I knew I was gonna use Radiant Decay in it, I just played a first, one note right when it loaded, and that was the sound that I thought was gonna be perfect for this. So sometimes the initial patches are actually the way to go. So we have that, and then I have two other instances of Radiant Decay. So the next instance of Radiant Decay that I used was an effects preset that comes with the library. It's called A Very Broken Broadcast, and I thought it would be cool to have this sort of sound. It almost sounds like a transmitter, like someone's trying to call and they're just trying to communicate on some broken broadcast sort of thing. And I also used this plugin from Isotope called Vinyl, just to give it even more of that kind of old vinyl, scratchy, kind of distorted sound. And it sounded really cool with it. So if we just play a single note, and you can see this is also using some XY movement. And then if you want to hear how it sounds without the plugin, a little bit darker. So, and then with vinyl. So it gives it a little bit more of that kind of like higher nasally type of sound. And when I was showing this demo to some of the other guys at Soundiron, Mike Peasley had an idea of using some kind of Morse code in it too. And he found this one and it was saying, "Please help me, I'm falling." So I thought that would be pretty interesting. So what I did was I duplicated the track, and then I did a little bit of tweaking. I just mainly turned all of the layers to where the releases were off. So when I play a note and let go, it kind of pauses a little bit more. So if we listen to just this by itself, it sounds like this. And then I also threw an auto pan on it, so it's kind of panning back and forth left and right. And then if we listen to all three of these together, so it's almost in the background, like you can't really tell, but the panning helps sort of give it a little bit more separation and movement, and just sounds kind of, kind of whirly. So I thought that sounded cool and really kind of aided to that haunting kind of sound. And then after that, I wanted to bring in some other instruments, and I'm using our artillery Shell Cello. And this is sort of bringing in a little bit of inspiration from the Joker soundtrack. Hildur is a really good cello player, and I thought some of the phrases and the sounds in this kind of made me think a little bit of that kind of Joker sound. So this isn't a demo in that style, but I just wanted to incorporate a little bit of that because that's also one of my favorite soundtracks. So let's listen to how this sounds also with the artillery Shell Cello. And this is using the swell 8 counts. I really love the sound of this. So if we just play a single note, you hear these naturally recorded swells. And I really love the sound of this instrument. It has this kind of sorrowful sound to it, and I thought it really helped with just kind of bringing in that sort of like depressive feel. So let's listen to that now. So I'm going to be using Radiant Decay, and then also bringing in some of the artillery Shell Cello. So let's check this out. And then we also have some phrases. These are from artillery Shell Cello as well. And then a little later in the track, I'm using some other instances of Rust Prime. So we have these tower rails, and then I also have these reversed sounds, and then I also have this other one called Beneath Lows, and it's really cool. So they have these tower rails right here. Really cool. And then these reverse sounds I really liked, and using them more as like swells into these other parts. And then we have this other one called Beneath Low's Mod Wheel. So let's check this out. So when you go up on the mod wheel, you start to hear a little bit of this ambience in the background. So going back to the artillery shell cello, I want to talk a little bit more about the phrases that come with it. And these are all in C minor. The track is basically based around C minor. So if you want to hear a few more of the phrases. And one of the things I like about this library is the phrases are very emotive, and you can shape them a little bit more if you want to use the mod wheel too. So you can do that. But for this track, I just pretty much left the mod wheel all the way up, so that way it can just play at full volume how it was recorded. So yeah, these phrases are really cool and just really kind of help add to that sort of dramatic type of depressing sound. And then last but not least, I'm using our Hyperion Strings Oktobass. And if you haven't seen an octobase, it is massive and it just produces this really low and intense sound. Almost sounds like a musical equivalent of like a motorcycle or something. So when you play really low, so that's not even as low as you can get. So I just keep going down and I wanted to use the swell sustains for the octobase since I'm using those real recorded swells for the artillery shell cello. So there's just a lot of movement going on in the string department. And I really just wanted to have the octobase be that really kind of low tone, just to add a little bit more low end and just give it a little bit more of that low rumble to support some of the other types of ambiances that are in this track. So for most of these tracks, I really didn't do too much when it comes to effects, but for the Rust 2 ensemble, I wanted to use an EQ just to shave off a good chunk of the high end. So if you listen to this without any of the effects, sounds like this. Super, very bold and in your face. So this just gives a little bit more of that kind of darker sound. And then I'm also using Portal from Output. This is a really cool effects plugin, and I'm using the preset Crystalline Ascent. So just kind of gave it this sort of extra kind of like dark ethereal kind of sound. And then if I bypass this, and then width. So I thought that was really cool and just kind of gave it a little bit more of that kind of spacey dark sound to it. So I thought that was really cool. All right, so that about wraps up the Soundiron session. If you want to learn more about any of the virtual instruments that I used in this demo, make sure to head over to soundiron.com. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't, and we will see you in the next one. Take care.